Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the 17th episode of Ornamentations. Today I have a couple of quick updates on some ongoing projects, the giveaway winner from the last episode, and a fabulous prize to offer as part of the Simple Harmony Stitch Along. But today we will mostly be looking at one of my completed panels mounted on my embroidered in progress casket, which for those new to my channel is an elaborate reproduction 17th century box with lots of hidden drawers and secret spaces. But before we get to that, I wanted to update you on a few things that you've seen before. The first of which is my stitch of Artful Offerings Cranberry Christmas. So when I last showed this to you, it was pretty far along, and since then I have finished the stitching, blocked it, and done the intended finishing into a drum. And this is my finish. It's got this beautiful, absolutely, I love this color, vintage silk velvet on the top, and I think the gray really picks up the more subdued tones of the stitching and the color choices here. However, I'm not actually all that pleased with the finishing here. On a technical level, I don't think there's anything wrong with the drum. There's a little puckering here at the top because it was really hard to size a velvet colored circle exactly to the circumference of the drum. But the bigger problem here is on the proportions. This doesn't look like a drum to me. It looks like a pillar candle, and it really isn't what I visually had in mind here. So my first thought when I finished this, because I love the trees, I want to see more of the trees and less of the house. But so my first thought when I finished this was that it needed something a little more, and I would just kind of jazz up the edges, maybe with some of the beaded picot loopy thingies that I still haven't found a name for. Anyone have any suggestions on that? What are we calling that? I'm not quite sure. But then I sat and I looked at this a little more, and I thought, why should I be satisfied with a finish that I don't particularly care for when I liked the stitched finish so much? I'll insert some photos of it post blocking so you can see what it looks like all laid out and how much the blocking job really improved the appearance of the stitching. So my thought now, which I'd love your feedback on, is that I am actually going to take the drum apart, which I think should be just possible because top and bottom were just slip stitched in by hand. The only thing I have to do is remove this machine stitch seam at the back, which I think I can do pretty carefully and come out with an acceptable finish. But then that will be going back into a pillow. I'm not really that into framing holiday pieces, so yeah, I think it's gonna go back to a pillow. Let me know what you think about this. The reason I decided on a drum on the first place is that I thought the proportions on this were right. I probably should have made a mock-up, measured, or actually figured out what this was gonna look like once it was in a circle. But I realized I didn't really care for the pillar candle look. But I did want to try something new. I have so many Christmas pillow finishes, and I thought, try out a drum. This wasn't the right pattern for a drum, so I think I am going to take this apart so that I can see my full finish, which I really do love the stitching on this, the colors, and that little bit of sparkle from the Accentuate. So what are your thoughts? Am I totally crazy nuts, or is the pillar candle thing and the messed up proportions bothering anybody else as much as it's bothering me? So that's Cranberry Christmas, which is maybe FFO'd, but probably going to be taken apart. Either way, I'll keep you updated on what happens with this. And then I have been very, very diligent about continuing with my Stitch a Little Christmas every day to have lots of decorations, but spring is here in Northern California. It is my absolute favorite time of year to be outside, to be in the garden with new things growing and the maples leafing out, cotinus leafing out. It's beautiful. The weather is beautiful, the garden is beautiful, and I'm really feeling spring right now. And with all the new market releases, I've been looking at spring stitches and thinking that maybe I would just take a break for a hot second, do one of those. So I am working on Brenda Gervais Harietta Co, which is, God, how many times am I going to stitch this? This is Peppermint Pals, but with bunny ears and spring colors. So I did Peppermint Pals twice, one for me, one for my mother. I did Merry Old Soul, which is Peppermint Pals, but with Santa. And now I've got Harietta Co, which is bunny Peppermint Pals, essentially. And this is my in-progress stitch. I've done a lot of the block stitching. She doesn't have the head yet, doesn't have a border. I've had a lot of fun with those great checks. This is like most of my stitches done in Soie Gobelins, and once I am further along and I've got all my colors definitely picked, I will post those on the next episode. I'll update you how this comes along pretty quickly. I think this is on Legacy Linen, Brewer's Malt, because I use Fuller's Teasel for everything and thought maybe, let's switch up to a different shade once in a while. So this is Harietta Co, which is my current seasonal stitch, after which I think I will be back to Christmas, but I was really feeling spring. So that's what I did here. And then I'm thinking for a second about how I'm going to do this. I think because the setup today is a little different, so I can show you my casket panel, which the piece itself is heavy enough that I can't just hold this up for ages. So I've got a table here. I'm gonna have to switch camera angles. Now I'm rambling. So I think what we're going to do before getting to the casket panel is I will announce the giveaway winner from the last episode and announce my prize, the first of 3 prizes. So the giveaway winner of Helen M. Stevens' World of Embroidery, the book giveaway from the last episode, is Tim1724, who I think is a fellow casket stitcher. Tim, I have commented on your comment, and if you could give me your address via email or direct message, I will be thrilled to send this out to you, and I hope you enjoy the eye candy as much as I have. But with that, let's move on to the really big news for this episode before getting to the casket stitching, which is the prizes for Simple Harmony. So I have been thinking about how to offer just a little bit of extra incentive to get those of you who are stitching along, I know you're out there, to not put off the finishing. And I thought offering prizes for the first 3 completed finishes, so this is not finished stitching, but totally FFO, the box, trim, hardware, the whole 9 yards. And I am offering 3 prizes for the first 3 full finishes of a Simple Harmony box from anyone in the Stitch Along anywhere in the world. So I will be showing you the first prize for the first completed stitch this week, second prize in the next episode, and third prize in the episode after that. So this is the first prize for the first completed stitch of a Simple Harmony box. This is one of my posies. It is beautiful pinks and reds that, if you are doing the red Simple Harmony box, it should nicely complement your red interior. If you're using one of the alternate colorways, it could still be something beautiful that you'll keep around your house. So this is very much inspired by a 17th century casket small, the kind of thing that a 17th century girl might have kept inside of her embroidered box. So this is the posy, And this will go to the first person to completely finish their Simple Harmony box. You will claim this by emailing or messaging me once you have a complete finish. I would like to note on this, don't rush your finishing, because you don't. This is meant to be an incentive not to put off your finishing work, because I know it can be intimidating. It was very intimidating for me the first time I was doing a glued finish, and I've been there, I've felt that, so I wanted to provide some kind of incentive not to put it off. However, don't rush your finishing. This is really, really critical, not to skip any of the steps, to give the blocking the full amount of time that it needs, all the drying time that it needs. Give all of your glued finishes their full drying time under weight. Don't rush or skip any of the steps. It will show in your finishing. So the second to last tutorial went up last Thursday, and then the final tutorial in the Simple Harmony series, number 12, will be up next Thursday, after which you will have everything to finish your Simple Harmony box. Good luck, and we'll be looking at the second prize on the next episode. So with that, I'm actually going to pause this video and change the camera angle so that we can look at the casket panel that I have to show you today. So this is the substance of today's episode, which is the completed side panel of my in-process Brenda casket. We've looked at this casket before in a couple of previous episodes. I showed you the in-process lid in episode 14, the really big whip, and introduced the project if you are new to my channel and you haven't seen this before. So this is not actually the first panel that I completed on this casket, but it is where the story essentially begins. So that's where I thought we'd start our look at this piece. So this panel, I'm going to show you my drawing here, shows Brenda as a young princess of Britain, which is how she starts the story. And she looks into a magic mirror and sees her destiny, which is her true love, Artful, pictured here. And this is what starts her journey as a knight. She decides to go off on a quest and seek him in Fairyland, at which point she dresses up as a knight, masquerading as a man, and goes to seek her true love. But in this panel, she is still very female and in her guise as a princess. So we'll look at a few of the details of this piece. Sorry, this is my first time trying this setup, so I hope you'll be patient with me today. And I hope this is adequately going to focus. I'm trying to see the camera from here. So please forgive any wrinkles in the setup. I hope we'll get this ironed out before we move on to the next panel on this casket. So this is Brenda in her princess guise. I'm going to move this up a little closer so you can see. She has a 3D stumpwork face, not the best face I've ever done, but serviceable. And then she also has a wonderful dress, which this is a feature from some 17th century caskets that I really loved, because part of what I'm doing with this casket is paying homage to some of my favorite elements from historic pieces. This is a tribute to everything that I love about 17th century embroidered caskets and stump work. And in some of these, you would see female figures in these wonderful silver dresses. And the way these are formed, and I'll insert some process photos as we go through this video, is that very thin silver flatworm. This is an antique, but it would be closest to modern super. There, that's a good shot. Is couched down on linen with very fine silk thread. I used a combination of a very fine mulberry silks, Piper silk floss and Soie 103. In retrospect, this technique would have been a lot more effective with Soie Surfine, which would have had the right combination of giving enough color so that you could see the floral motifs on the dress, but without causing too much distortion on the silver. And as you can see the light reflecting, I think that shows you some of what's so fabulous about this technique. It's incredibly labor intensive, but the results are just stunning. The silver is amazing. And this is not like the synthetic silvers that you will be familiar with if you are primarily a cross stitcher. This is real metal thread, which has a real silver content to it. It's quite low. This isn't a particularly high percentage of silver, but the real metal in this means that it behaves quite differently from a synthetic. It's much easier to work with, and it has a shine and a sparkle that you will never get with a synthetic. So that makes the real stuff very, very special. So that's her beautiful dress, which was worked separately on a linen ground, like the slip that I was working on and showed you in the last episode, which is for the next casket panel. Sorry for my messy words. Apparently I can't complete a thought. So it was worked much like this, only the silver was laid down and couched with different threads to give the pattern that you see on the silver dress. And then after it was worked, the edges were trimmed under and it was applied to the padded form. The tree here is made up of tons and tons of French knots, some padded, some not, to give a variation in texture. And there's a lot on the ground under Princess Brenda here. And then my other favorite feature on this one, sorry for all the moving around, but trying to get this to not reflect too much in the light is a little difficult. So because she's supposedly looking in a magic mirror, I wanted this to have a reflective appearance, but I couldn't just stick a mirror on this piece because she's supposed to be seeing something in the mirror. So what I did here was I embroidered her True Love article on the ground, and then I covered it with a little piece of mica to give it that reflective appearance. That's a trick from 17th century embroidery, although I don't think I've seen it used in exactly this formulation. So this is what mica looks like unsplit. You have to wedge it open and then split it into finer pieces because it's got quite a lot of color to it and it's not that see-through until you get it down to the very thin split sheets of mica. So I made an oval, applied it over the stitching of her True Love, and that's what gives it the reflective shine of a mirror. And then he's framed by needle lace drapes with this great pattern to them. That's one of my favorite needle lace stitches, and it's worked in Soie Oval. So those of you who are casket stitchers are probably groaning right now. For those of you who are not, Soie Oval, which we'll cover in my coming specialty thread tutorial, is an untwisted flat filament silk. And Soie Oval gets a really bad rap because it snags really, really easily, and it's a thread with a definite learning curve. I know the first few times I worked with Oval, there were tears. I may have thrown a few things. It was incredibly frustrating, but at some point you get over the hump with Oval and you stop noticing all the things that used to drive you nuts with it. So not only do I comfortably stitch with Oval at this point, I actually needle lace with it, and I can work with a full wingspan length without snagging or tearing the thread or doing anything else really horrible. I'm pretty tall, I'm 5'8", so a full wingspan length is a pretty serious length, which is just goes to show that of all, if you put in the work to master the thread, will give you just spectacular, spectacular results. I think it makes for absolutely incomparable, beautiful, shiny, glorious, glorious needle lace. So the composition of this panel is really quite simple. It's just Brenda Mart looking into the mirror the moment that sets her on her journey. She's framed by a little bit of greenery and on a grass ground here in slightly different shades and textures of green to give some dimension to the panel. But the sides are physically smaller pieces. There's not as much to their compositions. So I thought that this was a good place to start the casket journey, taking you along on it, and a panel that didn't offer too much to dissect, as this is our first real look into a completed panel and how it turns out. It's also got a frieze here. Yeah, see the problems with this being the first time doing this. So the frieze is done in traditional 17th century style. It's just an arrangement of flowers and animals on a ground. That's silk wrapped pearl, some needle lace, and then look at that little leopard. So for his spots, I used tiny gilt spangles and anchored them with really, really tiny green seed beads from my collection of antique beads. And then I have a needle lace flower here. So that's the frieze. And that is the start of Brenda Mart's journey and the start of our journey into looking at this casket, which does have another completed panel on it. One thing I would like to note about this is that the edges, as you can probably see, are unfinished here. That's because, just like with the Simple Harmony box, the trim is applied last after every panel on the box has been finished and mounted, so that all of the trim gets applied at the same point to cover all the raw edges. So here I am using the same trim that I've used on Simple Harmony, only this is the silver. So this is Thistle Threads exterior woven tape. And it is, I think, just the most beautiful, beautiful trim. I love it. I use it on all of my boxes and I really can't get enough of it. The silver and the gilt are very, very blingy, very, very shiny, but I'm a sucker for sparkles, so that's not really a negative in my world. But so all these places where you've got a little bit of ravelly edges, cut edges, that will all be covered. Each of these panels will be framed on all four sides with this fabulous trim, because unlike the Simple Harmony box, this is not a wraparound. Each piece is a rectangle that's been applied directly to the box. It has 4 cut edges, one on each side, and then each of these cut edges needs to be covered before the box is fully finished, and they will be. So this is just one more look at Brenda Mart. If you do have any questions about techniques, questions about materials that I used, please feel free to ask me in the comments. I just wanted to give you a first look at one of the simpler panels on this box. Okay, I'm back. Trying to switch all the camera angles here is a little weird. I'm gonna have to think of what is the best structure to show these pieces to you as we get through them, because it is hard to hold these up and steady for any length of time. The box is solid wood and quite heavy once it's all together. I have heard your feedback about trying to hold objects up and steady close to the camera for longer periods of time so that you can get a good look at them. So I'm going to think some more about what's the best way to present the finished pieces to you, and hopefully you found this okay for today. So for the next time, we have an update on some finishing flourishes that I am adding to some of the finishes you've already seen because supplies have come in, and so I'm adding some trim, adding some beading, and adding some fun stuff to some of the pieces that you have already seen. I have updates on some of my current projects. I'm hoping to have a finish on Harietta and Company. I will be showing you the next prize for Simple Harmony as we looked at the first prize today, the posy, and then we will also be looking at some past springtime stitches because there's just something about the wonderful light breezes and blooming flowers and budding out trees that just really makes me feel that spring is here, and I love it. So I hope that spring is coming to you wherever you are, that you are getting some wonderful stitching in, some time in your garden if you're a gardener, and that I will see you next time. The last tutorial for Simple Harmony will go up on next Tuesday. After that, if you are stitching the Simple Harmony box, you'll have everything that you need to fully finish your box. So good luck with the finishing. Let me know if you have any questions or encounter any questions or issues as you do your finishing. And the most important things to remember are take your time and make sure you get in plenty of practice before you start your real gluing on your embroidery. So I will see you next time, and until then, happy stitching.